Welcome back, everybody. For this lesson, I'm going to be going over the creative techniques that I found as a reader when I read the chapter, The Man I Killed, from the book, The Things They Carried. So I have already previously taught you about certain creative techniques, and I encouraged you to practice analyzing a story for creative techniques in the previous lesson. So you practice that with the short chapter called Friends. And now I'm going to model this again by covering the creative techniques in The Man I Killed. Remember, after you are done with this video, you're going to not only take the quiz on The Man I Killed, so make sure you read those pages. I believe it's only about 5 pages, but read them carefully and pay attention to the small details so that you get 100% on your quiz, the Google form quiz. But after you take the quiz, then you're going to practice being a creative writer yourself. And so that's why the aim says, how do you write an excellent creative story? So you're going to be able to select one authentic photograph from Vietnam, the photos we've previously seen, and you're going to base your creative story off of that photo. So that photo will serve simply as inspiration. You will decide who's going to be the narrator or voice of the story. You'll decide, maybe you're going to be a soldier and you'll be the voice. Maybe it'll be from the perspective of a little girl, a civilian in the war. It could be anything. You have to use at least a few creative techniques and try to include them. And again, this is a very, very short anecdote from the war, a snapshot. So your story should only be 3/4 to 1 page long. So let's first kind of think about The Man I Killed and how the author employed some of these creative techniques I'm going to go over to help you prepare for this. So when I was reading The Man I Killed, I again was looking for these creative techniques, and I took notes on the ones that really stood out to me. So here are some talking points I'm going to go over right now. The biggest thing for me when I read this chapter is the emotional appeal that it creates for the reader. I felt so sad while reading the story, not only for Tem O'Brien, the narrator, who had killed this Vietnamese soldier, and how hard that must have been for him to accept that he had done this, but also this poor boy, this soldier, who is described in so many ways as being, kind of helpless and feminine, and he didn't really want to be in the war, and all of these things make us feel so sad. But there's a couple of lines that are so impactful in creating this emotion, and they're revisited multiple times. So there's repetition. The first one is when it describes this slight tear at the lobe of one ear. So you can picture his body on the ground, and as he's dying, a tear coming out of his eye and rolling toward his ear. And it's so specific and particular, and it just makes you feel, oh my gosh, how terrible, how sad. He must have suffered. He must have been thinking about his family when he was dying. He must not have died right away. He was crying. So horrible emotion it evokes in the reader. Secondly is when it describes this butterfly that first is on his chin. So here we have this horrible, gruesome, graphic injury where we see the wounds on his face, his teeth, his jaw, his eye. It's all of this awful, awful, horrific stuff. It's very grotesque. But then there's this striking image of a butterfly, and people love butterflies. Butterflies are beautiful. Little girls usually want butterflies in their bedroom. They're colorful and vibrant. They're these delicate creatures, and we often think of butterflies in a sweet and beautiful manner. So the fact that there's this butterfly on this grotesque injury, and then it comes back at several points in the chapter, and later it's on, I think, by his forehead, and then it's gone. So we'll come to that line in a little bit. So beyond the emotional appeal, wow, that heavy description that I just kind of got into. There's so many specific details about these wounds, and certain things in particular you keep coming back to, like the star-shaped hole that is his eye. And I felt like that was particularly powerful because it's almost like you're just like staring into this star hole. It's like getting your focus and you're thinking of nothing but that star shaped hole. And you can imagine that that's how it was for Tim O'Brien after he killed this man, that he has this laser focus. He's like blank. He's so numb and in shock, and all he sees is this gaping wound. And so the heavy description and details, it's almost like you're in Tim O'Brien's head running through every little tiny wound and injury on this man that he's staring at. And it helps us understand how absolutely horrible this is to be him in this position. Next, I wanted to talk about the character development. So, wow, this narrator invents a whole life for this boy. Whether or not it's true, that's another factor. We're not sure. But he creates this whole story of what he was like, his background, how he loved mathematics, and he's wearing this gray ammunition belt. He describes all the details about him, but he invents this story about who he was in Vietnam as a person. And there's a lot of detail there. I want you to pay attention to that because there are some questions about that in the quiz. Next, dialogue. Unlike the short story we read, Enemies and Friends, which contained very, very limited, very little dialogue, this story contains a lot of dialogue that interchangeably come in between Tim O'Brien describing this boy he killed. And one of the lines is so horrid, and it's the way Azar talks. So we only have two characters talking. We have Azar, who speaks so horribly and is like that devil on Tim O'Brien's shoulder. And then we have Kiowa, who's like the angel on the other side, who's trying to comfort him and console him, and who really has compassion and has a heart. And so the line where Azar says, "You, quote, fucking trashed the fucker," it's just like, oh my God, it dehumanizes this Vietnamese soldier, and it makes readers kind of feel like, wow, there might really be soldiers like this who have lost all sense of humanity and they're just out to kill. They're like violent murderers. That's the way Azar is speaking, and it's really scary and perhaps authentically real about what it can be like when you go to war. And on the flip side, we have Kiowa, whose language is, he just keeps talking to Tim. Come on, man, it's okay. You had to do it, man. Like, he just goes on and on and on. And the whole time, Tim is absolutely silent and won't respond. But so that dialogue is really powerful in helping us understand what that scene is like. And then I come back to that emotional appeal, because throughout this continuous storytelling in Tim's brain, what he's seeing, what he's thinking, the butterfly returns, and it describes how it made its way along his forehead. And then it talks about his comparison of this boy to a woman, his shapely fingers, and like a woman, and his eyebrows like a woman. It's like you feel like he was just so helpless and so unprepared for war, and he didn't want to be there. And then the butterfly is gone. So it's almost like, wow, the butterfly is symbolic of like his spirit, his soul leaving his body at that time. Maybe he was still kind of there, or his soul was lingering on. So again, such a powerful image. And lastly, I want to come back to dialogue again. And it's this one word Kiowa says, talk. And it's silent. Tim has nothing to say. He won't give him one word. And it's like, Kiowa's just like, can't take it anymore. Talk. And it's empty. It's over. It's done. So I think that Tim O'Brien did a great job in helping us understand what it was like to be there in the war and to experience bloodshed and do the kinds of things that soldiers have to do in war. So at this point, you're going to choose one of your favorite images from the following slides to use as inspiration for writing your own creative story. Please remember it's at least, this says 1 page, but it's 3/4 to 1 page. And remember to record your photo number and to type it into your assigned Google Doc. Also, don't forget to take your 10-question Google form quiz. This is an excellent opportunity to boost your grade, especially if you struggled on your Great Gatsby essay, which is also a test grade for this last marking period. All right, so I'm just going to remind you, here are all of those photos, and you have access to this PowerPoint inside your assignment on Google Classroom. You're going to choose an image that really speaks to you, and you're going to think of a little imaginary story you make up that's related to the Vietnam War. And you could be a soldier, you could be a civilian, you could be a family member back home. It's really up to you, but use the photo as inspiration. All right, everyone. So I am going to close out by just running through these photos quickly. That one's a hard one to look at. All right, so think about this slide. Did you base your creative story on one photograph, your inspiration? Did you jot down the correct number of your photograph? Did you write your 1-page creative story in your assigned Google Doc? Does your story demonstrate 3 to 5 creative techniques? Did you submit your Google form quiz on the man I killed? Should take you 5 minutes. Hopefully you've learned something today about creative writing, and I want you to start thinking, what are your signature techniques as a creative writer? What are the ones that you would be known for if someone would find your writing years from now after you were gone? So remember, we're approaching our final project, final exam, which is just your personal statement for college. So you're going to want to employ a few creative techniques. Thanks, guys.